The Panama Canal is an artificial 82-kilometer waterway in Panama that connects the Caribbean Sea with the Pacific Ocean. It cuts across the narrowest point of the Isthmus of Panama and is a conduit for maritime trade between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Locks at each end lift ships up to Gatun Lake, an artificial freshwater lake 26 meters, 85 feet, above sea level, created by damming the Chagres River and Lake Alajuela to reduce the amount of excavation work required for the canal. Its construction was one of the largest and most difficult engineering projects ever undertaken. Since its inauguration on August 15, 1914, the canal has succeeded in shortening maritime communication in time and distance, invigorating maritime and economic transportation by providing a short and relatively inexpensive transit route between the two oceans, decisively influencing global trade patterns, boosting economic growth in developed and developing countries, as well as providing the basic impetus for economic expansion in many remote regions of the world. First Colombia, then France, and later the United States controlled the territory surrounding the canal during construction. France began work on the canal in 1881, but stopped in 1889 because of a lack of investors' confidence due to engineering problems and a high worker mortality rate. The US, working behind work previously finished, took over the project in 1904 and opened the canal in 1914. After a period of joint American-Panamanian control, the Panamanian government took control in 1999. It is now managed and operated by the Panamanian government-owned Panama Canal Authority for the last 26 years. The idea of the Panama Canal dates back to 1513, when the Spanish conquistador Vasco Núñez de Balboa first crossed the Isthmus of Panama. European powers soon noticed the possibility to dig a water passage between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans across this narrow land bridge between North and South America. The earliest proposal dates to 1534, when the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V ordered a survey for a route through the Americas in order to ease the voyage for ships traveling between Spain and Peru. In 1668, the English physician and philosopher Sir Thomas Browne specifically proposed the Isthmus of Panama as the most convenient place for such a canal. The first attempt actually to make the isthmus part of a trade route was the ill-fated Darien scheme, launched by the Kingdom of Scotland between 1698 to 1700, which was abandoned because of the inhospitable conditions. In 1870, US President Grant established an Interoceanic Canal Commission, which commissioned several naval officers, including Commander Thomas Oliver Selfridge, Jr., to investigate the possible route suggested by Humboldt for a canal across Central America. The commission decided in favor of Nicaragua, establishing this as the preferred route amongst American policymakers. US President Theodore Roosevelt and the United States Senate were interested in establishing a canal across the isthmus, with some favoring a canal across Nicaragua and others advocating the purchase of the French interests in Panama. Bunau Varilla, who was seeking American involvement, asked for $100 million but accepted $40 million in the face of the Nicaraguan option. In June 1902, the US Senate voted in favor of the Spooner Act to pursue the Panamanian option, provided the necessary rights could be obtained. On the 22nd of January 1903, the Hay-Herran Treaty was signed by United States Secretary of State John M. Hay and Colombian Chargé Tomás Herrán. For $10 million and an annual payment, it would have granted the United States a renewable lease in perpetuity from Colombia on the land proposed for the canal. The treaty was ratified by the US Senate on the 14th of March 1903, but the Senate of Colombia unanimously rejected the treaty since it had become significantly unpopular in Bogotá due to concerns over insufficient compensation, threat to sovereignty, and perpetuity. Roosevelt changed tactics, based in part on the Mallarino-Bidlack Treaty of 1846, and actively supported the separation of Panama from Colombia. Shortly after recognizing Panama, he signed a treaty with the new Panamanian government under terms similar to the Hay-Herran Treaty. On the 2nd of November 1903, US warships blocked sea lanes against possible Colombian troop movements en route to put down the Panama Rebellion. Panama declared independence on the 3rd of November 1903. The United States quickly recognized the new nation. This happened so quickly that by the time the Colombian government in Bogotá launched a response to the Panamanian uprising, US troops had already entered the rebelling province. The Colombian troops dispatched to Panama were hastily assembled conscripts with little training. While these conscripts may have been able to defeat the Panamanian rebels, they would not have been able to defeat the US Army troops that were supporting the Panamanian rebels. An army of conscripts was the best response the Colombians could muster, as Colombia was recovering from a civil war between liberals and conservatives from October 1899 to November 1902, known as the Thousand Days' War. President Roosevelt famously stated, "I took the isthmus, started the canal, and then left Congress not to debate the canal, but to debate me." Several parties in the United States called this an act of war on Colombia. The New York Times described the support given by the United States to Bunau-Varilla as an act of sordid conquest. The New York Evening Post called it a vulgar and mercenary venture. The US maneuvers are often cited as the classic example of US gunboat diplomacy in Latin America, and the best illustration of what Roosevelt meant by the old African adage, "Speak softly and carry a big stick, and you will go far." After the revolution in 1903, the Republic of Panama became a US protectorate until 1939. Demands for the United States to hand over the canal to Panama increased after the Suez Crisis in 1956, when the United States used financial and diplomatic pressure to force France and the UK to abandon their attempt to retake control of the Suez Canal, previously nationalized by the Nasser regime in Egypt. Panamanian unrest culminated in riots on Martyrs' Day, the 9th of January 1964, when about 20 Panamanians and 3 to 5 US soldiers were killed. A decade later, in 1974, negotiations toward a settlement began and resulted in the Torrijos-Carter Treaties. The 7 September 1977, the treaty was signed by President of the United States Jimmy Carter and Omar Torrijos, de facto leader of Panama. This mobilized the process of granting the Panamanians free control of the canal, so long as Panama signed a treaty guaranteeing the permanent neutrality. The treaty led to full Panamanian control, effective at noon on the 31st of December 1999, and the Panama Canal Authority, ACP, assumed command of the waterway. The Panama Canal remains one of the chief revenue sources for Panama. Before this handover, the government of Panama held an international bid to negotiate a 25-year contract for operation of the container shipping ports located at the canal's Atlantic and Pacific outlets. The contract was not affiliated with the ACP or Panama Canal operations and was won by the firm Hutchison Whampoa, a Hong Kong-based shipping interest owned by Li Ka-shing. On the 21st of December 2024, US President-elect Donald Trump asserted that the United States should retake control of the Panama Canal from Panama, claiming that the rates Panama was charging American ships were exorbitant and in violation of the Torrijos-Carter treaties. The following day, he claimed that the canal was falling into the wrong hands, referring to China. Shortly afterwards, Panamanian President José Raúl Mulino responded, denying that the United States was being unfairly charged or that anyone besides Panama was in full control of the canal, and affirming that the canal was part of the country's inalienable patrimony. On the 24th of December, a protest was held at the US Embassy in Panama City over Trump's threat to take back the Panama Canal. Protesters referred to him as a public enemy of Panama. On the same day, the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America, ALBA, made up of 10 Central and South American countries, denounced Trump's comments and affirmed its support for Panama's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and self-determination. On the 7th of January 2025, Trump, in a press conference, vowed to gain control of the Panama Canal. He refused to rule out economic and military action against Panama to seize control of the canal, to secure what he called US economic security. He reiterated his intent to take back control of the canal in his inaugural address the 20th of January.